Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the Beyond Monkey series where we are building a real-world YouTube clone application. So in the past couple of parts, part 1 and part 2, we were focusing mostly on how to get started or think about before starting of our application, what different architectural patterns we may have to consider, where are we going to source our data from, what other considerations we may have in terms of the UI design and so on. In part two, we looked at especially building a common framework which we can use across many of our applications. Now, some of you must be wondering and asking that we are already spending or already have spent almost a couple of hours in this series, and we have not started seeing anything specific to the YouTube clone application. That is why, because most of the time that we have been spending so far is on building a common infrastructure for our application, which will make the further processes or developing screens or working with the data much more easier going forward. Let me give you a simple example. So you recall we built this REST service based class, which is basically a helper class which with a set of helper methods which allow us to quickly extract data from REST API endpoints. You may be doing a lot of things in there. You are checking for error handling. You are checking for if the data is already cached, if internet connectivity is there or not, and whether to serve it from the cached data or not. You are converting it, or rather deserializing it, to your object model and returning it. And we saw that when we created our YouTube service class, you could see how easy was it to get the data back. So basically, we just want to search for videos based on certain search query that we pass in. And here, just with one line of code, you could get this data back very quickly. Otherwise, you would have to write all that boilerplate code, checking for error handling, checking for cache data, deserializing. A lot of these things you have to do again and again. And this is just one example. So here we are searching for videos. As we will proceed, you will see we have much more API calls to make. One of the API calls will be to get the details of the videos. Here we are just searching for videos with some basic information about the videos. But we will also need to get the details of the video. We will also make an API call to get the details of the channel so that we can show the logo of the channel whenever we are displaying the information on the screen. We also need to make a separate API call to get the comments related to a video. So already I'm talking about, in addition to the current search video API call, we have at least 3 more that we need to work on. And once we are done with this series, you can take this code and you can extend this application to the way you like. You can add more and more functionality, which means you will need to make even more API calls. So just imagine, because of that common infrastructure, this one line of code gets the data for you. Of course, here we are just saying resource URI. I could have not declared this as a variable. I would have equally put it directly over here, but just for readability purposes, I am putting it here. Another important thing to note is the ongoing maintainability and the ease of extension. So this ease of extension is what I mentioned right now. Maintainability is also important. I told you I could have easily put this whole URL in this API call itself, in our get async function call, but it makes it much more easier if you put it rather like this. So tomorrow, if you want to make a change, someone knows, someone new comes in, looks at your code, he will say, okay, he's declaring a resource URI, and this is how he's calling the endpoint. This is the API endpoint to be called. And then this is a simple API call that needs to be made. And it is going to return a video search result. It's as simple as that. So this was for our API calls. In today's video, we are going to be working on similar concept, but this time around for our user interface. We also need to make it much more easier for our user interfaces to be created. Your application does not just consist of one page. We are not building an application which just has a big number in the middle, or just like the default Maui template where you click on the number and or click on a button and it does something. This is not how real world applications are built. There is a lot of navigation going around. There are a lot of pages, a lot of functionality. And when you're working with so many pages, again, there is a lot of boilerplate code that you have to write everywhere or in each of the pages. Consider if you want to build a branded user interface or a custom branding, you have to apply that branding everywhere on your pages. This is what we are going to simplify. We are going to create a base page which is going to have the the brand, the color schemes, the design of your brand, your name into the application, and each and every page is going to reflect the same thing. Additionally, in almost all of the pages, you will also need to have some sort of a functionality wherein while you are fetching data from the REST endpoints, it may take a while, half a second, 1 second, 5 seconds. You do not want your user to keep wondering what is happening. Rather, you would want to display maybe a friendly indicator to the user saying, okay, please hold on. Right now, we are doing this part, or please hold on. At the moment, we are looking for this. Or in case if some error occurs, rather than showing that ugly stack trace of your application error, you would rather want to show a customized error screen. Take an example. If your device is not connected to the internet, you may want to display a no internet connection icon with a message saying, hey, looks like you do not have an internet connection at the moment. Please check your internet connection and try again. Or if it was an error related to an API endpoint or anything specific to your application, you may want to show a user-friendly image, maybe an error image to the user with a message saying, hey, something went wrong in your application. This is the error. Please try to fix it and run the same function again. So in almost every page, you are going to have this sort of requirement. That is what we are going to build. We will again build a reusable framework in our YouTube clone application, which we can use or rather reuse in each of the pages that we have. An additional thing is, since we are using MVVM pattern and almost all the applications would be using MVVM pattern, every page requires hooking up to the backend view model. You have to write some boilerplate code, and you also have to pass on the parameters from your page to your view model and back from view model. Let us say view model has completed some processing. You want to notify your your view or your page. You have to write some code. That is all we are going to automate. We will see how we can auto hook our views to the view models and make this passing of the data back and forth much more easier. So let's get started with this. What we will start with, before I go into the pages itself, let me go to our view controls, and I'm going to create a couple of controls which we can use and reuse again and again in our application. These controls are going to be a loading indicator control, where we can show if something is being done by our view model. Let us say we are fetching the data, or maybe we are doing some complex processing which is going to take time, and we want the user to wait, and we don't want him to feel lost as to what is happening. We have to indicate to him something is happening in our application. And the other is an error indicator control, where I mentioned in case of an error, again, we can decide whether it is internet connection error, some API endpoint or REST API call error, or maybe a divide by zero error. You decide what kind of error it is, and based on that, you can display a user-friendly error screen to the users. So let me go ahead and let me create these controls. I'm going to call them, rather, I would create a new folder. I'm going to call them common controls. So under my view controls, I'm going to create a folder called common. And in this common, I'm going to create new controls. So let us start with the error indicator control first. It's going to be a .NET MAUI content view, error indicator. I got the spellings right, yes. So this is our control that we will use. Let me clean it up a bit. First thing that we are going to do, we are going to change this content view to a vertical stack layout, because we want to display a few components on the screen. These components, in our case, will be an image, the error image, maybe a heading as to what is this error about, and the details of that error, so on. So this is what we are going to do. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to say that by default, it is always not visible. And I'm going to give it a padding of 48 on the left and right, and 12 from the top and bottom. And then I can remove this. So this is a vertical stack layout control. Another thing now I will need to do, I will need to make sure that I change the base implementation from content view to a vertical stack layout. So let us go back over here, and this is where we can now define our user interface for the error indicator control. I'm going to bring in the code here just to show you, and then I will explain what it is. This is to save time. So what I have over here, I have an image. I have given it a name, image error, binding it to the image which is coming back from our page. So depending on what type of error it is, we can specify what error image to use. I'm going to horizontally center it on the screen, and I'm going to give it a certain width and height with an aspect ratio of aspect fit. Then I have a couple of labels. I have a header label where I'm just saying something like, oh, this is to indicate, something has gone wrong. This is the style for this header. And then this is where the actual error will be displayed. So in this particular case, I'm just saying use a smaller font and display it with a word wrap line break mode. Now we have defined these couple of styles over here. So let me actually go and let me add these styles to our app.xaml file. I'm going to go to my app.xaml, and you recall this is where we are putting in some common styles for our application. We have the content page style, which all of our content pages will use. We have the navigation page style. We have the grid styles. We have the border styles. We have the collection view styles. So all the grids, for example, the borders, the collection views will be using this style. And now what I'm going to bring in, I'm going to bring in a few label styles. So I have a style for the regular labels and the medium labels. If you recall, rather, let me go to the app.xaml.cs. No, not that app.xaml.cs. In our Maui program, we defined a couple of fonts. We said we will be using the Fira Sans light font to be used as our regular font, and the medium font to be used as our medium font. So these are the aliases that we provided to our fonts. Now we have the regular font and we have the medium font. And since it is a dark theme that we have chosen, I have decided to call them, something like regular light label text style and medium light label text style. As we proceed further, we may need to display something in inverse, wherein maybe we are showing a frame which has a lighter background. So on that, inside of that frame, we may want to display the text in dark color. So one thing, by the way, that I have done, I'm creating a base label style. This is again to reuse, and let me explain how it is to be used. I have created a base label style, which is called base regular light label text style. And what it has a default line break mode of tail truncation, font auto scaling enabled equals to false. I am not using that in my application. The font family I'm using is the regular font, and the text color is light text color. The light text color is defined over here. So we have a light text color which is very close to the white, and also I have a dark text color which is very close to the black, but not absolute black or absolute whites. And now what I have below, I have defined certain labels, light text with different sizes, size 16, size 14, size 12, And what I am doing in each three of them, I'm saying this is based on my base regular light label text style, which is based here, which means that this regular light text 16 or 14 or 12 inherit all of these four properties. The only thing I'm changing in each of them is the font size. So when I say light text 16 style, it is actually font size 16, line break mode, tail truncation, font family, regular size, text color, light text color, and so on. Similarly, I have done the same thing. I have created a base medium light label text style with similar parameters. The only thing which is changing is the medium font. And then on top of that, I have also defined a base medium dark label text style. So you recall I was saying in some of the places we may want to inverse the color. So rather than defining it in our XAML every time, what I have done, I have created another base medium dark label text style, just like the base medium light label text style, and it is based on this light label text style, the base style. So it inherits everything, and the only thing it changes is that the text color gets changed. And now we have got the same concept, medium light text 20, 18, 14, 10 different sizes, where only the font size is changing. And then I have also defined a page header style, which we will be using in some of our pages, and I'll show you where we will use. So this is a big font size of 22, and it is based on the base medium light text label style. So that is all about reusability. Let's go back over here to our XAML. So this is the XAML that we have created for error indicator. Now let me go back and implement this in more details. So here, what we need to do, we need to create some bindable properties that we can use. Now you could see over here, it is binding to error image. If I go back, now what we need to do, we need to bring in some bindable properties. I'm going to copy paste it first, and then I'm going to explain what all is happening over there. So I'm creating three bindable properties: is error, error text, and error image. First of all, the is error property is a Boolean property which is going to enable or disable, basically make this whole control visible or not visible. If on this control in my XAML, if I've declared a instance of this control, and if I say that is error is true, this whole thing becomes visible. I'll be able to see this error image and some text. But if I say it is false, then it is going to make this whole control invisible. So this is just a declaration of this is error property. This is how the bindable properties work. And on change of this property, I'm calling this set is error method, which is just taking this error indicator and it is making its is visible property equals to the value that we have passed, whether it is true or false. So depending on is error, it will either be visible or hidden. Then I have the error text property. So if I go back, there are a couple of properties that I've defined where it needs some dynamic changing. So one is the error image and the other is the error text label. So for this, the first I have created an error text property, which is of type string. And whenever this property changes, I'm calling the set error text method, which is going to our LBL error text and setting its text to this particular value, which is passed. And then lastly, we have the error image. So same concept, we are setting the error image and we are just going and setting the source of our error image to this value, which is passed. So that's pretty much it on our error indicator control. So let me go ahead and close these. Now the next thing I need to do, I also need to create another control. I'm going to call it loading indicator. So again, going to be a content view. Same concept, I'm going to just clean it up a bit. By the way, I noticed that working on my MacBook is not a convenient or very convenient to make videos. I should decide, or I should make a switch to my Mac desktop. That will make it much easier for me. All right. So the same thing we should do over here. We are going to make it a vertical stack layout rather than the default content view. And I'm going to change the base implementation for this to vertical stack layout as well. Something very similar is happening over here. Let me define a few properties on this. Same concept, I'm going to make it is visible equals to false, because by default, I do not want it to be visible on the screen. The padding, I'm going to give the same padding as you saw previously for the other control, but this time around, I'm also going to give it a spacing of 4. So in between the content, I want to define some extra spacing. So let me bring in the very simple implementation for this control. It just has an activity indicator. I'm giving it a name, ACT indicator. By default, it is not running. I've given the width and height of 44 pixels or 44 points, horizontally centering it, and I am giving the color to our light color, which is defined in our SAML page. So the light color is 979797, which is, you can say, something like an off-white kind of color. And I'm setting the scale. So on iOS devices, I want the scale, or I want the error indicator to be a bit bigger. So I've scaled it up to 1.3, whereas on Android, the default size at 1x is pretty decent. I do not need to change that. And then I have also defined a label where I'm going to be displaying the message that is to be displayed to the users whenever we are performing any activity. Let us say making a call to the REST API to get search results. We may want to say, please hold on while we search for the videos that you asked for. Or when someone clicks on a video, we may want to display, please hold on while we are loading the video details for you. And then similarly, in the code behind, we need to now implement a couple of bindable properties. So let me bring in the code for that. So similar concept, I have the isBusy property. So from our view model, whenever we are performing an action, we will set the isBusy property to true. And if you recall, this is what we did in our base view model implementation that we did. You recall we had the isBusy is equal to false. And using this set loading indicators helper method, depending on whether we are starting the operation or we have completed the operation, we are setting the isBusy equals to true or false. So this is the property from our view models that we can bind to this control in our XAML when we are using, and depending on the value of this, I'm calling this set isBusy, and it is what it is going to do. It's going to do a couple of things. If it is busy, it is going to make this whole control visible, and it is also going to set the isRunning property of our indicator to true, which means our indicator will show, or we will see a spinning indicator. But when we set the isBusy property to false, it will first of all hide the control, but also set the isRunning to false. Now, you may ask, why do we need this? Theoretically, if we are just hiding the control itself, that should be more than good enough, correct? But unfortunately, while an indicator is running, it is actually running an animation in the background. It is going to consume resources. So best is to stop this activity indicator so that we do not hog resources. And then similar thing for our loading text property, I'm just going to set this labels text to the value which is being passed on. By the way, both of these controls, you will see we are not going to be reusing again and again. When we define a base implementation of our views or a base page, we will just use these controls once, and then all of our pages are going to inherit this base page, which has this implementation or use of these two controls. We do not need to use them explicitly again and again. We will see that. Now, a couple of things that I want to do in our apps.xaml file, just to close this so that we do not keep on coming back. I'm going to complete this for our whole of our application. later on when we start implementing, you will notice we are going to be using a light border control, or basically a border, and I want to give it a light color as the border. So I'm going to define that. And then for our application icons that we will display on the screen, I'm going to define a border for that as well. So let me bring that and keep it handy. It's nothing fancy. I'm just applying a style to our image buttons. Icon button style is the name I'm giving. So I'm giving it the height and width of 32 points. Padding on my Android, I'm going to give it a padding of 4, whereas on iOS or all other devices, Windows, Mac at least, 6 points. I'm going to make the background color as transparent. Margin I'm going to set as 1213. You will see, because when we are using this style in our base page, I want to give a margin on both sides. We may display an icon on the left hand side of the screen, or we may display an icon on right hand side of the screen. Let me actually show you in context of another application. Let me run that application. So here you can see this is the icon style that I'm talking about. So we have an icon on the left hand side. So I'm giving it certain margin from here. If I go to another screen, you will notice now I have an icon on both the left hand side as well as on the right hand side. And I'm giving it this margin of 12 pixels from both sides. And I'm giving it a margin of 3 pixels from below, top and bottom. And nothing fancy about this. Corner radius, I'm going to set it as 8, though we are not displaying any border, so corner radius is not going to be particularly important, but we can make use of the same style, and for that we can override the background color, and then you will be able to see the border radius as well. Let me see if I have an example for that. Yeah, this is another of my applications. So here you can see there is no need for any borders over here. It is just displaying the basic information. Let it, and this is the error, sorry, the loading indicator that I was talking about, that we have to give a visual cue to the user that we are performing some activity. I think my internet might be misbehaving. Let me change the internet. And this is the error message that I was talking about, that we display an user-friendly image on the screen with an error message. So let me go back to my shows. Okay, this is what happens. This is again an error message, a customized error message, where there is nothing on the, or the user is not tracking any information. So let me go and discover and search again and see if it works this time. Yeah. And I'm going to click on one of the videos and see how it looks like. I don't know if you can see it over here. It is flickering, but in this top right side, the icon that I'm displaying, it has a subtle border and a background color to this. So you get the idea. And then I'm defining some visual states, some common states in case of normal or disabled states. How do I want to display it? If it is normal, I want it to be full opacity. If it is in disabled mode, I want it to be displayed at 50% opacity, or basically a dimmed version of this icon or image button. So this is our AppSaml style. With this in place, I'm going to go and I'm going to create a base view model for our implementation. Let me explain what this is going to do. I'm going to call it, I'm just going to create a simple class, app view model base. So this is a simple class that we are creating. Let's clean it up. I'm going to make it partial because I'm going to be using Community Toolkit MVVM package for iNotify property change code injection. And I'm going to derive this from my view model base. The view model base is what we created in our MAUI framework, which is over here, which has all of these is loading, title, data loaded, error state, etc., functions. Now, one of the things that you may ask is, why do we need to create this? Because we are not going to be doing anything funky in this particular application or in this particular view model. We could have very well created it as part of our view model base directly itself. It is true, it is possible, but what happens is in my implementation, when I show you, I am using something very specific to this application only. Now I cannot move that into a common framework which can be reused across applications. That is why I am deriving from the view model base, which is handling most of the common functionality, and anything specific to this application we are handling in this implementation. So I'm going to move this to our global usings. Keep it clean. There you go. So what was I talking about? Now, in this particular view model, in this implementation, the base view model, I'm going to define a few properties which I'll be using. So I am defining an interface or a variable called navigation service, which we will use for navigating to different pages or opening up model pages, model views. And then when we look into hooking up our views to the view models, you will see we do not need to pass this automatically. Our implementation or the default MVVM framework that we will create for this application will automatically populate the navigation service. Similarly, I'm also going to pass in the page, and I'm going to call it page service, because the page uh, in our MAUI framework allows us to display or do certain actions, such as display action sheets or display alerts. I know there is a way wherein you can say MAUI application dot current dot shell dot blah blah blah. We do not want to have any hard-coded dependencies inside of our view models. So that is the reason I'm going to avoid that. Now this I'm going to inherit from our base model. Now, one of the reasons why I did not put this whole code, so far, whatever you have seen, I could have done it in my main page itself. But you see over here, we are going to be injecting or auto injecting another dependency, which is our app API service. Now, this app API service is going to be different across applications. In our case, I'm going to create or reach out to YouTube endpoints to fetch the data. In some other application, I may be going out to Food Database Authority to get information about nutrients, or I might be going to IMDb to get the movies information and so on. And this iAPI interface that we have created for our service, this may be different across applications. The return values will be different, the API calls, the parameters, everything is going to be different. That is the reason primarily that I am created, or I've decided to create a separate view model base for our application. And I'm going to have this auto injected in my application across the board. So I can say app API service is equal to app API service. Now, why did I decide to inject this API service into my view model and not everything else? At least in our applications, or I believe in majority of the applications, almost all the pages, or at least 90 plus pages, will need to reach out to your API backend to fetch the data and do something. So it is always better to have it auto injected into your view models. Now, there are some places, or there might be some services which may be used once in a while, maybe in one or two view models. Those you can keep it out of this implementation. That is something we will see as well. For example, later on we will create another service which will help us to download the files or download the YouTube videos and save them to our local devices. That is only going to be used in one particular page. So for that, I'm not injecting it into my view model base. That I will be injecting in that specific page only. And additionally, what I'm going to do to complete this view model, I'm also going to create a couple of common commands. So these commands are relay command. I'm using the MVVM community toolkit. So this is what we have defined over here. And let's actually move this out to our global using class as well to keep everything clean. I know this is a bit of a hassle because every time when something comes up, you have to move it. But trust me, once this is done, next time around, when you use the same class, it will not appear and you will not have to worry about it. It will automatically be injected. So this is more like a one-time affair. So I'm going to create a couple of commands, a navigate back command and a close model command. So what does the navigate back command does? It just calls our navigation service, which will automatically be passed from our views to this view model. In fact, not to this view model, the implementations of this base view model, and it will simply do a navigation service dot pop async and navigation service dot pop model async. Basically, it will be closing the pages. So what do I mean by that? Let me again run the application just to show you. If I go over here, we have this back icon. This icon we are going to be implementing in our base page. If I click on this, or there may be number of pages, every time when I click on this, automatically it will take me back. I don't have to write the navigation service dot go back or this page dot push pop async. I do not need to do that. Or if I have let's say a model which has opened up, in that case our base model is going to be displaying this cross icon, and when I click on this, it is going to close for us. So this is what these helper commands are going to be doing for us, and they will be available to us in each and every view model, and we will see how we can make use of it. So this is our app view model base. Now let us go and let us start defining a UI for our application. So under the pages or under the views, I'm going to create a base page. A base page is a page which has, in our case, or in fact in any of the cases, it has a custom look and feel which can be reused across any of the pages. Just like you have this concept of inheritance in classes, where you can define one base class and you can keep on inheriting or creating different versions with added properties. The same thing we are going to be doing for our pages. So we'll create one base page which is going to have some basic infrastructure already set up, and all of our pages are going to be inheriting from this base page, which means it will be consistent look and feel and some of the consistent implementation as well. So let us go and let us add a new file. I'm going to call it page base. It's going to be a Maui content page. Let me call it page base. And let me clean it up a bit. And we are going to remove the default stack layout that comes with it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in some namespaces. So in our base page, what we are going to do, we are going to, let me bring it first. We are going to bring in this iOS platform specific namespace, and this defines or gives us the functionality to hide the auto indicator or the hide the home indicator view which appears up in the screen. Let me actually show if I can. how it looks like. I am unfortunately on a Mac, so it is running on the Mac. It is not showing. Otherwise, you will notice at the very bottom, there is a small indicator which appears. I do not want that indicator to be appearing in my application. Again, this is a choice. If you want, you can implement. If you are not interested, you can simply remove these lines. I'm going to remove the title, and instead I'm going to replace it with a background color. Or in fact, it is not needed because we have defined it in our app.xaml that all of our content pages should have this background color. So let us implement this page. So I'm going to say grid, and I'm going to say ignore safe area is equal to true. So this is what I meant. We have that home indicator area on the iOS. So I want to extend into that part as well. So that is why I'm telling the OS that I want to ignore that safe area. So extend me in there. I'm going to define a couple of, or in fact, 3 rows for my application for this page or for every page. So I'm going to say row definition, and this is going to be, I'm going to use on platform to say if it is Android, set the height to 16. If it is iOS, set the height to 36. Otherwise, set it to 0. So this is our first row. Then I'm going to have another row, and this one I'm going to give a height of auto. This is the row which we will use for our top header. Let me actually show you. Sorry to keep coming back to this. So here you see at the top, we have this status bar area, and then we have, this is the second row. So this was the first row, and on iOS I'm giving it a space of 36. If you run this on your physical iOS device, you'll be able to see the actual status bar over here with the time and your network indicator and so on. So this is the second row, which is going to have our header, which will have some basic information or the page title that we want to display, and some icons on the left and right. And then at the bottom, the third row is going to be our main content. And since I wanted to extend into this bottom part, this is why I have done this. And then I'm going to create my third row, which is going to take up the rest of the space. Now, what we are going to do before we start, in our third row, we are going to be putting the actual page content. So let's actually define that. So right now I'm saying that this is my page content grid, and it is starting on the first row itself. We will see in the code behind, depending on how we want our page to look like, we will extend into the second or third row, or we will start in the first row and extend into second row. Let me again show you an example. So by default, in many of the applications, you see that when we start, it is not taking up or it is not filling up this status bar. But if I go in any of my video page, you will see it is actually extending into the status bar as well. That is why in our base implementation, we had defined a no navigation bar, or what we said should ideally have been called extend into navigation bar property, so that we can define where it goes into. So this is where we are going to define our main page content. Now, what I'm going to also do, I'm going to say, okay, before this, I'm going to bring in my, let me fix the namespaces. It does not like that. XML NS base controls equals to, what did we decide to call it? View controls dot common. Yeah. So this is how we use our error indicator. I'm saying it is going to be displayed in row number 2, which is our last row, and it is going to be binding this is error property to the view models is error state, error image, and error message, and I'm going to center it on the screen. And if you go to our view based model, this is where we have the is error state, error message, and error image. So it is going to be automatically handled as part of our base page and view model based implementation. Similarly, after this, I'm going to be also displaying a loading indicator. Again, I can put them both above this. So something very similar, it is going to display this in the second row based on whether the view model is busy performing text or not, and this is the loading text that will be passed to the indicator. So this is where we are going to display the main content. So let's actually now come back and define our header of the page. I'm going to bring in a lot of XAML control and show you how it looks like. Don't be overwhelmed. It looks a lot, but it is actually very simple. So what I have is, let's minimize all of these first, then I'll explain what everything is doing. So this is basically again a grid, which is sitting in row number 1, which is for our header area over here, row number 1. I can minimize all of these. And here I'm defining 3 columns, 56 points on both sides, and then the middle up taking rest of the space. And I'm also giving it a margin of 0 from left and right and 4 from top and bottom. I have decided to keep it as different for iOS and Android, but in case if it is the same for you as we have in this particular case, we can keep it the same. What I have seen, depending on different implementations or in different applications, I have actually used different margins for both iOS as well as Android. And same thing, I'm just ignoring the safe area so that it is extending into the top status bar if needed. So what does this have? It has actually 3 icons, first of all, to start with. So we have an image button, which is named as hamburger button. It is displaying this image, hamburger.png. Vertical options are start, horizontal options is vertical options is center. And then I'm using that icon button style, which I created in my app.xaml. And I'm putting this in my grid.column0. Now, one of the things I have put in over here, I'm not going to be implementing the click handler for this hamburger menu just now. We will do that at a later stage. So at that point in time, we'll bring in the click event handler. Meanwhile, if you want to see, yesterday I posted another video where I showed how you can implement, let me bring it up first, how you can implement an animated hamburger menu for your applications. You can check it out in my channel. So you see over here, this is how you can implement a animated hamburger menu, and that is something we will also be doing in our application, but later on. And then, so we have this image button, and then in the same column, I'm also putting in a couple of other image buttons. One is called navigate back button with the back icon. Same style, nothing fancy, but I'm referring to the navigate back command, which we created in our view model base. So if I go back to my view model base, it is referring to this navigate back command. And the other icon is the close button icon, which is showing a cross icon, and it is referring to the close model command, which is over here, close model command. So that is what I'm doing. So I have three buttons, and I will be changing the visibility of these buttons depending on the type of page it is. So stay tuned. I'm going to show that how it is done. Then I have this page header label. So this is a label which is taking up the middle space, the whole of the middle space. I'm just going to call it title label, and it is going to be using that page header text style. Nothing fancy about this. Again, using the bindable properties, we will be setting the value in this label. And lastly, since we said that we have the third column on the extreme right, where we can also display user defined, or in our case, page specific icons. The ones in this column are only these icons, which is hamburger button or close button or back button. But on the right side, for each of the page, we can decide what icons to be displayed. Again, if I go back to this application, this is the main page where I did not have any specific icon to be displayed on the right. So if I go to this second page, here I wanted to show an icon which will show me a hint. Or if I go to another page where, let me go to stats page. Here I'm showing another icon to share the statistics. So this is what we can use for this purpose. Now I do not know what each of the page or each of the pages will have, what kind of icons will it have. So all I'm doing, I'm just defining a grid, calling it page icons grid, just like I called our main grid over here as page content grid. I'm just setting it to my second column, which is column number 3 in this case, giving it again a margin. We do not need that in the context of this application. It is same, and I'm just putting them at the end. We will let the user or the developer decide what icons to be displayed over here. So that's it for our base page. Now, how do we actually make use of it? The very first thing, when we are making use of this base page, how do we get access to, to this page content grid and this page icons grid? How do we get access to this? That is pretty simple. All I will need to do, I will need to define or expose a couple of properties, which I will do over here. So I'm just going to expose a couple of properties, page content and page icons. And this page content is actually referencing all the children of page content grid, which is defined over here, which is my page content grid. And then for the page icons grid, I have defined another property called page icons, which is referring all the children. Now, once this is done, basically, whenever we create a new page, let's call it, by default, you see a page like this, right? Content page, something / content page. Okay. And then you specify what you say, content page dot content / and then this is inside is where you define your content, your visual elements. In this case, what we will do something like this. We will say page content, and then we will define our content / page content. And then similarly, we'll have page icons, and this is where we will define our page icons. We will see that in action. So this is what is going to expose. I'm also going to be exposing a property which we can make use of if required. In some of my implementations, I want to check if the back button is enabled or not for my execution, and then I can decide not to navigate back or show another message. So I will give you a typical example. Let's say I am on a data entry form where the user is typing something, And there is, of course, a back navigation button, which is visible. Now, the default behavior is when you click on the back button, it should take you back to the previous page. Let's take this particular example. If I say back button, it will take me back. What if this was a data entry form and I'm typing something and by mistake or even willingly, I click on the back button? What should happen? Ideally, I should check if there is something which has changed and the back button has been pressed. I may want to display a message to the user saying, hey, you have some unsaved data on the screen. Are you sure you want to navigate back? And depending on the response, I may or may not perform that navigation. So next, I'm going to bring in a couple of bindable properties, which we will be making use of on our page. So I'm going to be defining a few properties and I will explain what these properties are. Let's do this after the button. So I have a property which I'm exposing it as page title, and all it is doing, it is setting the value of this page header label, the title label. It is just setting it over here. So if I show you in the context of this application, so you see if I go to the main page, it is showing me popular and trending. If I go to a specific series, it shows me the text as that. If I go to another one, it shows me something else. If I go to say settings page, it shows me something else. So this is all this bindable property is doing. So on title changed, I'm just checking if this property is not empty, display it, update the value in XAML, otherwise, and make it visible, otherwise it will be invisible. Then I have another property which I'm going to expose, which is page mode property. And this is coming from this page mode that we specified in our base infrastructure. The page mode is going to specify what type of page it is. Is it a menu page where we need to display a hamburger menu with some animation? Is it a navigate page where we need to display a back icon so that we can go back? Is it a modal page where we display a close icon and on closing we close the modal window that has opened up? Or it is none, wherein we do not want to show any icon on the screen. So this is a property for that, and it is going to refer to this namespace. I can go and move it to my global usings. Let's come back over here. And on changing of this on page mode property, all I am doing, I'm calling a function called set page mode, which I'm defining below, passing in this value. So what does this function do? This function is simply checking the page mode that is passed by the user. For example, if the page mode was menu, then I'm making the hamburger menu button visible and my navigate button and the close button as invisible. So go back to our page. You remember we had three image buttons, one for hamburger button, one for navigate back button, and the other for close button. So this is what I'm doing. If it is of type hamburger menu, only show the hamburger menu icon. If it is the navigate button, then make the other two buttons as invisible and only show the navigate back button. Same for my model. And if anything else, which in this case none is passed, then make all of these three buttons as invisible. So this is one bindable property that we have created. Now the next bindable property that we are going to create is content display mode property. Now this is quite interesting. It is coming from this content display mode, whether we show the navigation bar or we extend into the navigation bar. Coming back to this application, right now this content is not extending into the status bar, but if I click on this, this whole image is extended to the top. Again, over here, it is not very visible because I have created a gradient control in this application, because I don't want it to just show the information like this. I want it to blend in into my page. So this one, it is just calling this set content display mode function that I have created, which is again a very simple function. What it is checking is a switch statement. If it is regular navigation bar, then let's go back over here, and this is our page content grid. You remember when we were defining our error indicator, we provided which row it is going to be displayed in. When we displayed our loading indicator, which row it is going to be displayed in. But for our page content grid, where the main content is going to go into, which is going to be exposed by this page content property in our sub pages for reusability purpose, where does it go into? This is where we are checking. If it is navigation bar, so I am just changing I'm starting it on row number 2 and row span of 1, which means it is only displayed in the third row of our page. But if I say no navigation bar or extend into the navigation bar, then I'm starting it on row 0, which is the very first row, and I'm setting the row span to 3, which means the whole content spans all the 3 rows. So in this particular case here, I have set it to navigation bar. So my main content, which is starting from here, it is only set in row number 2, which is the third row, with a row span of 1. But if I go inside a particular page, let's say this one or this one, this is starting at row number 0, and the row span is set to 3. By the way, this is what I meant. If you see over here, everything is going to the very bottom. And if you recall, not this one, this ignore safe area. So because I'm setting the ignore safe area to true, that is why it is extending into this. If I had not set this property, this would have been pushed up a little, and you will have a small area at the bottom, which will show your home indicator button. And even that home indicator button, wherever possible, I'm hiding it on iOS. So if you go and install this application, let's say on your iPhone devices, you will notice that whenever you navigate to a page, you will see the home indicator coming up, but after maybe a couple of seconds or 3 seconds, it will disappear, so that you have a clean look like this. That home indicator button will not be taking up or showing at the bottom all the time. But the moment you start scrolling, or you start scrolling from the pushing up from the very bottom to see the task manager, again it will appear automatically. So that is what it is doing. So here we go. So this is how we set the content display mode. So this is that's it. This is our properties. And in our page base, what I am going to do, just to start off, I'm going to say, okay, navigation mode, navigation page has no navigation bar. I'm disabling the navigation bar. The reason I'm doing this, I have noticed in Xamarin Forms, it used to work fine, but on Maui, I had an issue. Even though I set it to false over here, sometimes from my appxaml file, it takes effect. Sometimes it does not. Not sure if it is something that I'm doing wrong, but I have seen very strange behavior in .NET MAUI. So I'm hard coding it over here to set the navigation bar to false. And what may happen is, since these properties, the content display mode and the page mode, these are optional properties. What if when we are creating a new page based on this base page, what if we do not specify? I still want to do something. So the default behavior I'm calling the same functions which I shown you. I'm calling the set page mode with the page mode of none, and I'm setting the content display mode of no navigation bar, which is extending into the display. So that's for our base page. Now what will happen, by the way, yeah, this is done. Let me save this and we can safely close. Nothing is required over here. Now, one of the things that will happen is the moment we do this, the moment we extend into the navigation bar, the status bar at the top, on iOS, it works beautifully. And you saw in the previous video, we went to the platforms folder in the info.plist. We also changed the color of the the status bar text. But what about Android? On Android, it will still show you that status bar at the top, which will have a dark color. So what we want to do, we want to make that status bar transparent. So how we can do this? We can do that using lifecycle events in our Maui application. If you want, you can very well go to the platforms folder and do it over here. But this is again a beautiful thing that has been exposed as part of .NET MAUI. Till in Xamarin Form days, I had to go to my Xamarin.Android project, and I had to go on the creation of the activity. I had to make the status bar transparent, but now it has made it much more easier to write platform specific code in one place. So the way we do it is simple. We just come over here and we say configure lifecycle events, and I'm only configuring the lifecycle events if I'm running it on Android. So what I'm doing, I'm simply saying events dot add Android event, and I'm saying on creation of the main activity or any activity, I'm calling a function called make status bar translucent, passing in this activity. That is all I am doing. So this is a function that I have written over here. I could have easily gone and written it any place else. Just to keep it consistent and easy for me to understand, we are putting this. So what is this function doing? Make status bar translucent, passing in the Android activity. It is just setting the flags and making sure that I'm using the no limits layout mode. I'm setting the color to translucent status. Sorry, I'm clearing the translucent status flag, and I'm setting the status bar color to transparent. That is all I am doing in this. So now when we run this application on Android, you will see also the content. If we decided to use this content display mode of no navigation bar, which is over here, it will now extend into the status bar as well. If we did not put in this code, then you will see it will show you the status bar with solid colors, and that small bit of image which is being shown over there will be hidden behind that status bar. Now don't worry about all this code. What I will be doing once it is completed, this whole course is completed, I'll be posting this whole course series on my GitHub page. So I'll link to that repo towards the end of the course. So I think again today we have a video of 1 hour. Let's take a break. We'll continue back from where we are leaving off today, and next time we will implement auto hooking of our views with our view models, and promise that will be the end of the infrastructure. From that point onwards, we will start hardcore development, building our YouTube clone application. But you will see, just for your reference, you will see because of this base page code that we have written today, along with the common view controls, the loading indicator, the error indicator, and a couple of additional classes that we will write next time to auto hook our pages with our view models, you will see how easy your life will become. It will be as easy as this. So rather than writing a complex piece of code to, let's say, call your REST endpoints to fetch the data, deserializing them, now same thing we will apply to our pages. It will make it extremely easy for us to declare our pages. You saw as an example how easy it will be to add the icons, to handle the back functionality, the close functionality, in terms of the user interface design and so on. And moreover, it will be automatically hooking into your view models, and on page starts or page load, it will automatically initialize your view models and execute the initialization code on that view models. Something like this. If I click on any of another video, let me click on Stranger Things. you will notice automatically it is going and initializing the getting show details logic, and then it is displaying. And we will also be doing some of the animation that we did over here. So let me show you. So you see the content comes up with some animation. It is not coming up with a bang. And trust me, for this part, getting the show details or automatically uh, hooking up this view model or calling this initialize method, I have written 0 lines of code. So we will see that in action. So that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more content on .NET MAUI, please do consider subscribing to this channel and click on the notification icon so that you can stay updated as and when new content gets posted on this channel. By the way, yesterday I did post that video on how to create a custom navigation, custom menu in our applications. Let me see if I have this. Yes, let me show you. So this is the Maui Planets application, which I had built last month as part of Maui UI July series. And the whole code for this is also available on my GitHub page. I will also link down to it in the video description below. What we implemented, this menu, is when I click on this profile picture, it shows you a nice animation and reveals the menu which you can work on. Clicking anywhere in the menu, it brings back the main content. So that video is also available. If you are interested in this, please have a look to that video as well. So that's it. See you all next time.